For the last 2 weeks, I've been working on my entry for the Kaiju Jam, Kaiju Klash, which is a turn-based combat game based around building your own monster from a variety of parts to get different stats and abilities and pitting it against increasingly difficult opponents over the course of 10 rounds. I'll link to it in the description if you want to check it out. I'm going to use this video to talk about a few interesting game dev takeaways from the experience. So first, let's talk gameplay. The gameplay is fairly standard turn-based combat, with the main hook being the combination of different monster parts together to reach your goals. Want some more defense? Maybe replace the robot treads with lobster legs. Want your monster to be more evasive? A squid part could be the right call. The distinction between monster parts isn't always as strong as it could be, but I also don't think any monster type is so egregiously far off that you always have to use it or avoid it to win. Which kinda leads me to my next major point, which is balance. Balancing this game was a lot of work, and there's still a lot of work that could be done in that area. I knew balance was going to be important for a fighting game going into it, but considering there aren't that many combinations of monsters and parts, I was hoping it was going to be a bit more straightforward than it ended up being. In the end though, I did find that using a classic exponential curve to scale both enemies and the stat effects of parts helped to provide a good sense of progression to the game, making each new level of combat or upgraded part feel significant over the last. The balance can be a bit wobbly in places, since it's easy to end up with a few rounds that are too difficult or too easy, but ultimately the curve seems to work itself out in the end for the most part. So this project was interesting from an art side because it was the first time my partner and I have worked on a project together. She designed and drew the monsters on paper, since neither of us are up to date on digital drawing techniques, and then we digitized and colored those drawings on the computer. It's a technique I've used once before many years ago, so it was nice to see that it was still effective here, if a bit slow since you have to redraw the monsters on the computer. Additionally, making the arms, legs, and torsos of different monsters connect together seamlessly would require a lot larger art ask than what you can really do in 2 weeks, so we decided to do thick white outlines for each part and embrace the inconsistency, making it look a bit more like paper or stickers put together to make a monster, and I think that ended up working well for the most part. I was going to use a shader for that, but I found the performance on HD assets like these was just too bad using Godot's GLES2 renderer, so it's pre-rendered into the source artwork. The music for this game was tricky, and I ended up a little disappointed in it overall, but it does work. We originally wanted to do battle music more akin to Pokemon or Final Fantasy, but I had a difficult time getting the core composition to work with that, so I ended up going with the backup idea of just doing kind of a heavy, grungy guitar riff to kind of reinforce the destructive nature of these giant monsters. And like I said, it works well enough, but I'm not convinced it was the best choice for this game. The sound effects are fairly simple as well, since I didn't have as much time to dedicate to them as I would normally like to, so they're simple synthesizers from various VSTs I had lying around, and they work well enough, but I do still wish I had more time to focus on sound effects, just because I like to hear the little beeps and clicks and things of when you interact with the UI. And so let's talk polish now. It's pretty well established that by now, polish is the king of making your game feel complete versus a prototype. And while I didn't set out to make this game particularly polished, as evidenced by kind of the lackluster tutorial, I did end up throwing a lot of simple tweens and animation player nodes into the game to animate everything and make it a bit more visually interesting. The camera jumps when an attack lands, health and cash smoothly animate to new values, damage labels fade out, etc. I also used Godot's built-in open simplex noise generator to add a slight sway to the camera, and honestly I feel like this was one of the largest bang for your buck things that I did, just having that slight sensation of the camera being handheld during combat. And so this game actually ended up being one of the more polished games I've done for a jam, just because of having all these little animations that kind of added up as more than the sum of the parts. And lastly, it's just kind of an interesting tech thing with Godot. This is the first time I made use of Godot's resource class, and I've got to say that while it was useful and I understand why you'd want to use it more, it may not have been the best use case for this game. I used scripts that extended the resource class to manage stats and monster configurations, which made it easy to let the player purchase and equip parts on one screen and have those changes reflected in battle, but I do wonder whether a simple singleton in the form of an autoload may have been better. It's food for thought for now. And that's all I've got. Hopefully you got a few useful tidbits out of this, and like I said, I'll link to the game in the description if you want to check it out.